Okay, so we'll start. This Shabbos we start the third of the five Chomoshim with Parshat Bamidbar.
Fourth.
Sorry, what did I say?
Fourth.
Huh?
You said the third.
I'm sorry, the fourth. Yeah.
Three, they're listening.
And this Sedra is almost invariably said the Shabbos before Shavuos. And the Rebbe explains in a Sikha that the names of the Sedra, the various Sedras, by the way, are not part of Torah. They've been added by minig, by tradition. But we have a saying that minig Yisrael Torah here, which means that if Jews have a minig, that is part of Torah itself. And Bamidbar means in the desert, in the wilderness. But the English translation of that is numbers. If you pick up a Chumash with translation, this Sedra is called numbers. And it's called numbers because there is so much counting in the Sedra that you can understand why the English word for it is numbers. Now, there's a difficulty with this. We may get back to it if I get time, but we don't have time, so I won't spend time on it. But we don't count Jews. You have to understand that there's a whole background of spooky area where we don't count Jews. In fact, and we need to count Jews because we need Jews, for example, for a minyan. We need Jews for when there are occasions when we need to be satisfied that there are, for example, 10 Jews in a room for a minyan. So, we need Jews for a mezumim. So there's a whole method of counting which isn't counting, where people have a list of names or they have So counting Jews is the province of Hashem. And this week's Sedra begins with a counting, and in fact, there are basically three countings that we're going to be referring to tonight. The first counting was when Am Yisrael left Mitzrayim, when they left Egypt. The second counting was after the sin of the Egel, the golden calf. And the third counting was at the end of the construction of the Mishkan, of the sanctuary. And those three countings are elaborated in this week's Sedra, when the Sedra begins. And the obvious glaring question is, what's all this counting for? Why? And so Rashi, who is the par excellence explainer of the Torah for the simple pshat, for the simple meaning, Rashi says that, and by the way, the counting is by command of Hashem. This isn't a report of a news report. It's a report of the command that Hashem gave to Moshe and to Aaron to count Am Yisrael on certain occasions in a certain manner. So the question is why, and Rashi answers that question by saying that it was out of the love that God has for Am Yisrael, and because Am Yisrael is precious to him, then he is constantly counting and recounting Am Yisrael. That's one explanation. We'll come back to that in a minute. The second question on the counting, so the first question is why is God commanding the counting? Answer, because we're so precious to him. The second question on the counting is a much more fundamental question, and that is, why does God need to count? Well, he doesn't know. He doesn't know how many Jews there are. If we know how many Jews there are, it's one thing, but for Hashem, and bear in mind that, just put this in context of our whole, everything that we learn in Chassidus, that not only would God know how many Jews there are, but God is bringing everything into existence all the time. We learn that Bereshis bara Elokim es hashamayim ve'es haaretz is an ongoing process. Every microsecond, God didn't create the world once and walk away. It is constantly being reinvigorated and re-energized by Hashem bringing everything into existence all the time, to the point that we learn that if he paused for a second or stopped for a second, there'd be nothing. So if Hashem is actually bringing each and every person into existence, and let's understand what we're talking about. We're talking about bringing a blood supply into existence. We're talking about saliva into existence, talking about fingernails growing, toenails growing, hair on your head, hair on your arm. Every eyelash is being brought into existence, because if it weren't, it would cease to exist. So insofar as that's going on, why does God need to count how many Jews there are? So the Rebbe approaches both of these questions, and I'd like to just take a sidestep from the Sikha and just go through a misunderstanding. This is a misunderstanding that it depends how you learn, and I must say that I'm going to try hard to convince you to learn this way. This is the fact that we talk about Hashem loving Am Yisrael more than he loves, or like a parent loves a firstborn child, or after years of being unable to have children, and how precious Am Yisrael is to Hashem, and how Hashem loves and cherishes, and we are the chosen people, and we're an Am Segula, and the mistake that Am Yisrael make when they don't learn properly is to believe that's some kind of jingoistic, the United States is better than everybody else. Am Yisrael High is very important to us. And the fact that we are an Am Segula is very important to us, and it's part of Torah. But it's not because we are intrinsically superior in some way. It's because we've been entrusted with a greater responsibility. And it's very important to understand this. It's very important because there's been a very strong temptation in history to resist anti-Semitism by patting ourselves on the back and saying that really we are superior to all of these goyim, and that's not how we learn. That's not how Chabad Hasidus is learned, by people who learn genuine Rebbe Torah. When Gentiles used to come for dollars, the Rebbe gave them great respect. When when one of the mayors came for dollars, and the Rebbe gave him the dollar, he said, "What can I do for you?" The mayor to the Rebbe. What he wanted to show his appreciation for the Rebbe, and he wanted to do something. So you know what the Rebbe replies? This is on Jem. He says that the Chinese in Chinatown are having difficulties with X, Y, Z. Please help them. So when we talk about us being an Segula and a chosen people, this is a matter of responsibility. This responsibility comes to us, Shavuos. We celebrate Matan Torah. Matan Torah means the present of Torah. Torah is a present from Hashem. It's a whole lot of things. There's a long sticker on this. It's a present. It's a responsibility. It's something that you toil over. It's an inheritance. It's described as all of those things, and it is all of those things. But at the end of the day, that present is an appointment of responsibility. What's that responsibility? To bring light into darkness, to elevate the world, to take the mundane and make it kodesh, make it holy. It's a statement of a requirement of behavior. It's a requirement to behave in a moral manner, to be a light to the nations. What does it mean to be a light to the nations? To set an example of how a Jew lives in order to glorify his God. And that glorification of his God comes as a direct result of a Jew discharging his responsibilities. What's his responsibility? We learn this over and over again, to introduce Ruchnius into Gashmius and to elevate Gashmius into Ruchnius. That's our job. We were given that job on Mount Sinai. We were given that with the present, with Matan Torah, with the present of the Torah. But with that present comes a massive responsibility. And that massive responsibility is learning Torah and doing mitzvahs. And that's a Jew's life. And you know what? This is probably a difficult generalization for I'm sure there will be people on the tape who will have difficulty getting their head around this, but the reality is that this responsibility that we have is so fundamentally important that for a Jew, it makes the difference of spending a life of 60, 70, 120 years existing compared to a life of 60, 70, 120 years of living. And for a Jew, nothing else works. You know, you got to be old. I'm Baruch Hashem 82, and I keep saying this. I've had a practice in Double Bay for 60 years, and nearly 60 years. You know, the law, after 50 years, the Law Society sent me a certificate congratulating me for what? That I hadn't stolen from the trust account. But in that nearly 60 years, I'm telling you that I have acted for so many Jews, and they've been rich because the Jews in Sydney, Baruch Hashem, have a high socio-economic position in society, and some of them have been very rich, and they, with all the well-wishing in the world, they brought their children up to hurry up through school and hurry up to university and hurry up to get a profession and hurry up to make their own fortunes. And they stand at the edge of their graves at Rookwood, and they've got nothing in their hands. It's all gone through their fingers, not the money, their life. And it's absolutely tragic because they believed they sold out to various idols, that they'd be happy with money, that they'd be happy with health, that they go to the gym, and it's all excellent, but at the end of the day they miss the point, and it's tragic to see. And one of the things that the Rebbe tried to get in front of everybody was to increase in their Torah and mitzvahs, because that is the ultimate present. Matan Torah means present, the present of Torah. The absolute present is to be an Amsagula and to live that's what it means to be the chosen people, to have the opportunity to discharge this responsibility as Hashem's shliach in Gashmias, to bring Ruchnias into Gashmias and elevate Gashmias into Ruchnias. And that's our dynamic. And if you don't understand that dynamic, life is very confusing, because, we learned the Sedra Hukoisai a couple of weeks ago. And I'm sure we had a share on this. I don't remember which year we did this year, but which of the Sikhs we did. But the Sedra, you'll remember, begins Imba Hukoisai Telechu, that if you go in my ways, then you're going to have this and that, and this good thing and that good thing. And the Rebbe asks the question that there are plenty of people who live lives dedicated to Torah and mitzvahs and frumkeit, and they have pain, they have suffering. So what is this promise that if you go in my ways, everything's going to be honky-dory? What does it mean, honky-dory? And well, I'm not revisiting that share at the moment, but the one thing to understand is that pain doesn't equal unhappiness, and pleasure doesn't equal happiness. And when somebody has, I'll give you an example, I'll prove it to you. A woman gives birth. There's nothing more painful, according to my wife and I'm sure other good sources around the table. It's very, very painful, right? But is the woman unhappy when she gives birth? That's the happiest moment of her life. Why? Because she understands that pain is for a higher purpose. And she understands that the value that comes out of that pain is priceless. Conversely, if you want to say that happiness comes from pleasure, look at a heroin addict. He gets more pleasure than you and I do if you're not a heroin addict. But what sort of a life has he got? Is he happy? Don't tell me he's happy. He's in jail. He's in his self-made jail. So the real, and we don't have time to do that. That's sicker tonight. But one's consciousness needs to be that we, Am Yisrael, have a sacred duty, and the more you tune into that duty, the more fulfilled you are, and the better a life you have. Now, is that a reason to do it? No, the reason to do it is to serve your God. That's what Jews have to do. We have to serve our God by learning Torah and doing mitzvahs. The byproduct of that is that you're fulfilled. So when the commentaries ask, why does God have to count Am Yisrael? Rashi says, because we're so precious to him. He loves us so much. So let's explore that in view of what we've just been learning together. What does that mean, that he loves us so much? It means that he's given us a particular job to do. And because he's given us that particular job to do, he is investing in us the capability of doing it. So what does he love? He loves that we have that capability to do it. We're going to see in a minute this has to do with the neshama. And the neshama is a helik Eloka mimal. The neshama is a part of God himself. What does that mean? It means that one of the best descriptions I've seen in English is that a Jew has a common consciousness with his God. We'll come back to that. So, l'chaim, let me just. Okay. So how many times does God count Am Yisrael? You should know throughout the whole Torah it's 9 times. The 10th time will be when Mashiach comes. It's 9 times until now. Those 9 times are the 3 times that I mentioned to you. Yitzias Mitzrayim, when they did tshuva with the Egel, with the golden calf, and after the sanctuary was built. Then we have 6 more times in 3,500 odd years. So what are we talking about? We're talking about once every 400 or 500 years. There was a further count. How can Rashi say that he counts us all the time? And why does he count us all the time? Because he loves us so much. But he counts us all the time. Where do you see all the time? You see 3 times, then we have a whole of 3,500 years go by and there's another 6 times. That's hardly all the time. So the Rebbe explains this, that what all the time means is this, that when your neshama, when a Jew shares, a Jew's neshama, a Jew's soul is a helik Eloka mimal, as I said, it's a portion of pure godliness. Is that a jingoistic statement about our what princes we are because we're such good guys? No, it's a statement that says that we have the potential to effect the change that we're going to be celebrating next Shabbos, not just next Shabbos, on the next Yontif, which is in the following week of Shavuos, where we were given the task of bringing godliness into Gashmias and elevating Gashmias into Ruchnias. That is an enormous investment in us by our God. So that is what it means that Hashem loves us and counts us all the time, like you can. And Rashi explains, by the way, that it's like if you have something precious, you want to count. I'll give you an example. You go away, and let's pretend you're a jeweler. You go away overseas, and you come back and you find that the safe's open, but in the back of the safe, in a box that looks like a stationery box, you kept your best diamonds, and you had XYZ number of them. So you go to the safe and you go to check that they're still there. Because why? Because they're precious to you. So Hashem is counting. Why? Because we're precious to him. But what does it mean we're precious to him? It means that he is counting whether he has nachas from us being his shliach. And the reality is that a Jew who is focused on being nachas to his mishaleach, to the person who sent him to do the job, his life is a different life. Because when you have the pain, when you have the problem, there are two. Were you there this morning for the letter with the Rebbe? Yeah. Oh, I think maybe you came out. We have the chavrusas that we learn with together. We start with a letter from the Rebbe every day. It's a tonic, and this woman writes to the Rebbe, and the Rebbe says, "I'm very happy to receive your letter after all this time because you used to write so often, and there's been a big interval. But I'm displeased with the content of the letter," which is very unusually sharp for the Rebbe. I mean, if the Rebbe speaks to somebody like that, it means that they really have the capacity to take it. Otherwise, he wouldn't do that. But, with strangers, he was very polite. With the inner circle, he was very demanding. So he says, but I was very disappointed, very displeased with the content of the letter. And he said, you say that things are so difficult that you're crying all the time, and you ask my advice what to do. So he said, my advice is as follows, A, B, C. So A, stop crying. B, understand that we have an obligation to serve Hashem besimcha, happily. C, that the very fact that you focus on that and energize that solves the problems that the very thing that you're crying about. Now that's a mental and that's a dynamic by which we need to live. And if you live like that, you don't cry. Okay, it hurts. Yeah, we all understand that certain things hurt. But you have to have pain, otherwise you can't have childbirth. And Hashem's agenda is not our agenda. So we don't know what's just and what isn't just. If it happens, it's just. Do we have an obligation to fix what seems to be unjust to us through our vision? Absolutely. If somebody is in pain, do you have the right to start explaining Hasidus to them, why they should be in pain? No, you've got to go and hug them and help them, and if they need it, give them money, do whatever you need to do. But for you and me, when you're thinking with your own brain and your own heart and your own soul, the dynamic is that Torah and mitzvahs are our life. And with that Torah and mitzvahs, which is our life, comes a preciousness to Hashem to get the job done. It's a matter of responsibility. And that's what it means that he's counting us all the time, meaning that there is an expectation of a result from us all the time. And that's not tedious. If you learn to comply with that expectation, you get a glow, let alone being tedious. So, one of the properties of counting, let me do this with you. If you count the guys around this table, for example, and you come to a number, which we're not allowed to do, but let's say that you know how many people are sitting around this table without counting them. Excuse me. One of the things about a census is that it ignores the qualities of the people being counted. What you're counting is the number of people. And the number of people, the quantum of those people, is equal. And when we talk about actus, when we talk about unity, and before Shavuos, the Rebbe always used to have, and till Shluchim to have, actus fabringens. In Sydney, we've had them many years. I don't know. Unfortunately, there isn't. There are grounds for there being the opposite of actus, and that's a great tragedy. And very interestingly, my son in Israel was told by somebody he believes is a very big. That why was the shooting I should probably turn this tape off because I don't want to say anything that's political, and I don't know whether this is true or not. I'm just repeating what he said, that you couldn't have had the shooting if there was proper actus in Sydney amongst Jews. And the fact that there isn't makes Sydney a dangerous place for Jews. So actus is the concept of us being together, but not all the same. Not all the same. Everybody's different. And when the counting of Jews together is an emphasis on the fact that Moshe Rabbeinu, it's like golf. I don't know how many people here play golf. You play golf, a 2-inch putt is the same value as a 250-meter drive, right? Same one stroke. A Moshe Rabbeinu and Aaron HaKohen and the Levim who had the job of tending to the Mishkan, and an ordinary schlepper out the back who has no head to learn anything, and struggle for him to get through the day, exactly the same. It's one, in terms of the numerology of it, they're exactly the same. So what is the common denominator to all of Am Yisrael? That we should have actus, that we should look for actus and feel it when we encounter it. It is the fact that we have a neshama. And that neshama is a helik elokah mimal. It's a part of God himself. And every Jew, man, woman, and child, tall or short, fat or skinny, has a neshama. And that neshama has the same numerology as everybody else's neshama. And certainly people have different talents and different abilities and different brains and different levels of emotion and control and all the rest of it. But fundamentally, the fact is that every Jew has a neshama, and that is what's being counted. And the Rebbe explains a fascinating thing, that when that counting takes place, when a Jew is presented with the highlighting of the fact that he has a neshama, that is revealed to him at a different level than before he's made conscious of it. You know, when you learn Hasidus and you learn about your neshama, straight away that neshama in you is illuminated. You feel it. You know, there's a fascinating maamar, very deep maamar by the Tzemach Tzedek, explaining, because all creation follows the same rules, right? Whether it's min hashamayim or on earth or under the water, or it's God's Torah is true, and it's always true absolutely in every facet, in every way. So when we learn that we have a neshama and that it's a helik elokah, that neshama is, we're talking about the nefesh elokis, the godly soul. Not talking about the nefesh habahamis. For those more experienced, you'll know the language. Those less experienced, you've got to coast for a minute. But the nefesh habahamis is at war with the nefesh elokis. The nefesh elokis is what's called mislabished, enclosed in the nefesh habahamis, and its job is to elevate the nefesh habahamis. The jackpot, you should know, in creation, unlike the Catholics or the Christians or the Muslims, we don't believe that heaven is the goal and that heaven is the be-all and end-all. We believe that right down here on earth, this is the game. This is the main game. The main game is to turn God's apparent jungle into a garden. That's our job. We have to bring godliness into this physicality. And when we're doing that, we are, as I said, we're doing what we're supposed to be doing, and we are we are revealing to ourselves our own neshama. I was going to tell you about this mimer from the Tzemach Tzedek, and I lost my way for a second. The Tzemach Tzedek explains a fascinating thing. You know, you have God, and blind Freddie can see there's a God. You can see the trees working and the systems in creation that are in front of you. They're mind-boggling. You know, a human being has X, Y, Z trillion cells all doing exactly what they're supposed to be doing at exactly the right moment. The world is purposeful and obviously driven by massive intellect. So, although we can see God's Metzias, his existence, in the result of what's happening, we don't see God. You don't, unless you, and if you do, you maybe need to change your psychiatrist. You know? So since we don't see God, but we see the effects of God, so the Tzemach Tzedek says you can generalize that to everything. Let me give you an example. Your neshama and your guf, your body and your soul. What do we know about our soul? Nothing. You don't know how old it is. Its soul doesn't age. You felt the same way at 5 and 8 and 15. Your body felt different, but your soul doesn't age. You don't know anything about your soul. You don't know whether it's tall or short, fat or skinny, attractive or ugly. You don't know any of that. What you know is that it exists. How do you know that it exists? Because when the soul separates from the guf is dead. So this existence of the soul is revealed by this counting. In other words, what the Sedra is saying is that by this counting, the soul level of your existence is revealed numerically with actus, not without consideration of who's clever and who's more stupid and who's more honest and who's less honest. They're all different measurements. But the measurement of how many Jews there are at any given time is an equal measurement. And whether you're Moshe Rabbeinu or Shlepper Chaim Yankel, you count same one, same golf stroke. Okay. What is it that is revealed by that counting? So the Rebbe uses the term the Nekudas HaYahadus, the Jewish essence. What is that Jewish essence? That Jewish essence isn't privilege. And if you learn that it is privilege, you've got to throw all that stuff out. And it's difficult because a lot of Jews are brought up to believe that. You know, they don't know anything else. And they've been persecuted. Our history is a river of blood. And Jews have been, and they can be forgiven for trying to believe that's a statement of superiority and privilege. But it's not. It's not a statement of superiority and privilege, but it is an acceptance of the fact that Jews do have a neshama as opposed to a nefesh. That means that part of our soul, which is a helik elokah, which is a part of godliness, himself. And that is revealed when we're talking about essence to essence. When a Jew is functioning as a Jew should, and should want to, because it's an incomparable, it's life versus existence. What he is really doing is he is functioning in terms of his neshama, and the neshama means a different level of kedusha than the rest of creation. And again, that's not a statement of superiority, it's a statement of responsibility. Okay. What happened Matan Torah, which is why we're doing this Seder, which is always before Shavuos. What happened Matan Torah is when we received the Torah, we had access from our essence to God's essence. That's the dynamic, that's the real dynamic of Shavuos. I mean, you'll hear in your shul, your rabbis will say that until Matan Torah, Gashmius was Gashmius and Ruchnius was Ruchnius. You couldn't mix spirituality with physicality. The Gezerah against mixing that was removed, and all of a sudden, Jews had the power to elevate the physical into the spiritual and bring the spiritual down into the physical. All true. I'm not seeking to minimize that at all, but the fundamental thing that happened on Shavuos is that God's essence and your and my essence were revealed one to each other at a personal level. You've got to understand that at a personal level. That what does counting mean? Counting means individually selecting each single one. And you and I and every human being on the planet are perfect. Are you telling me that they have challenges? 100%. That's why we exist. The Tzemach Tzedek says in that mimer on recognizing that although you don't see anything, you don't know anything about your neshama, you see it. The words that he uses is that we know that the metzias of the neshama, but we don't know anything about the malchus of the neshama. For those who understand those Hebrew terms, one is the manifestation of something which is there, and the other is knowing anything about it really. Now, we don't know anything really about God, but we do know, but there is a level of essence to essence, and that level of essence to essence was manifest on Matan Torah, and was the prelude to that manifestation is the counting. And the counting, although it sounds like trivia, is hugely important in terms of what we're talking about. We need another 5 hours. Okay. So the Rebbe now explains this, that the 3 countings, don't think they're accidental, and they're just the fact that there's 3 is very important. The times of the counting is very important. It's Torah, so it's got to be not only true, but true for every Jew in every generation. So the temptation amongst beginners who are learning Torah is to say, well, what do I care when God counted the Jewish people? It was 3,500 years ago. You tell me once was when they left Mitzrayim, once was when they did tshuva for the Egel, which was, a month later, and then another week and a year later they built the Mishkan and celebrated the Mishkan. So what? How does that apply to me today, 3,500 years ago in Sydney, Australia in 2026? What's that got to do with my new car? So the answer to that is to understand what those countings were. And the Rebbe explains that they were 3 levels of highlighting the neshama. This, what we've been talking about, the essence of a Jew. The first time And in order to understand uh, the essence of the neshama, the Rebbe uses the example of Jews who throughout history, who kept nothing necessarily, would rather die than serve an idol. We have countless examples of this. Jews who didn't keep Shabbos, who ate pork, but they were confronted with the order to serve an idol, and they were ready to sacrifice their lives for it. Why? I mean, one of my friend's father, one of my frum friend's fathers, told us that he was in Auschwitz, and they were starving, and there was a psychiatrist in the camp who kept nothing, and he decided he was going to fast Yom Kippur. Never fasted Yom Kippur in his life. He was starving. And what the Nazis did on Yom Kippur is they brought in these tubs of steaming meat. You can imagine what sort of a torture that was. And this man refused to eat and died of starvation. And he never kept anything. This is a man who used to eat pork and was Machal Shabbos and everything. But sometimes there is a moment when the absolute essence of a Jew is under the microscope, and the Jew reacts in a different way. So the Rebbe gives the example of a Jew who is prepared to die rather than surrender to an idol worship. And then he goes on and says the following. But what happens if the threat is removed? Right? The guy dies. The guard has a heart attack and drops dead. And the problem is gone. Does that Jew go home and start to put on film and put up a mezuzah and go and daven 3 times a day? Not necessarily. He may do nothing. He may do nothing further. But, and that's the first level. That's when Am Yisrael ran away from Mitzrayim. They ran away from the evil. They couldn't deal with it anymore. If they'd stayed there, we learned that they'd been into the 50th gate of Tumah. We haven't got time for this at the moment. But they knew enough to run away. Was that energized from themselves? No, it was energized from Hashem. But then you get to the second level. Second time that we were counted is after the tshuva, after the egel. So now, going back to the same example, let's say the taskmaster or the person who's going to kill you dies, and you're relieved of the burden. But you ask yourself the question, 5 minutes ago I was prepared to die for being a Jew, and I know nothing about Judaism. So I'm going to learn something about Judaism. And if you learn something about Judaism, most Jews, if it's taught properly, become excited. Slowly but surely you get excited. Why? Because you've got a neshama, which is Eilik Elikah. So that person becomes, and he does affect some change. But that change is coming from his brain, not from his heart and soul. But when we finish the Mishkan, when we finish building the Mishkan is a physical abode for revealed godliness. And that's what a Jew craves. That's why we want Mashiach. We don't want Mashiach for a new car or a new boat or a new investment. We want Mashiach because we want a revelation of godliness, an obvious, palpable revelation of godliness that we can experience and relate to. So that's what happened in the Mishkan. There, it wasn't a matter of a Jew's essence coming back being tested at one level of, and then being increased by a second level of, when it becomes your whole existence. And when Hashem says, Osoli mikdosh v'shochanti besoicham, make me a sanctuary, and I will dwell amongst you. By the way, it's not in it, but the words are amongst you. And the Rebbe explains that means Kol echad ve'echad miYisrael, every single Jew. That's what that means. So when we have built a Mishkan for that, now we deserve to be counted, and that counting is a manifestation of our essence wedded to the essence of Hashem. And by the way, the word wedded I'm using specifically because Matan Torah is described as a wedding between Am Yisrael and Hashem. So, one last thing. We have Shavuos in a week, 10 days, whatever it is. And it's interesting that, Rabbi Philman always used to say to me that, or to everybody used to say that every mitzvah, everything needs a muzzle, even a mitzvah. For example, the mitzvah of bris milah has a big muzzle. Nearly every Jew has a bris. The mitzvah of shatnez doesn't have a big muzzle. How many people are fussed about shatnez?
Most people don't even know what it means.
Yeah, okay. It's a mixture of wool and linen in your clothing. and in the days that we wore handsome jackets like this, the padding in the shoulders was often a mixture of wool and linen. And Frum Yidden would take their new clothes from David Jones to a Jewish tailor to check it and change if necessary, change it. So every mitzvah has everything has a muzzle. And we have three regalim, three holidays. We have the whole of the Nisan holidays, that's Yitzias Mitzrayim and counting of the Oima and everything that we do in the month of Nisan, which ultimately culminates in Sukkot. Sukkot is our second holiday. And then our third holiday, of course, is Tishrei, where we have Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, Sukkot, etc. And Jews had to go to Yerushalayim and present themselves 3 times a year on these regalim, on these three. But of the 3, if you stop a Jew in the street in Double Bay or wherever you are, and he doesn't keep, what's he know about? First of all, he knows about Yom Kippur. That's the most important one, and of course, well over the fast, because that's such a huge problem. The fast, you're missing breakfast and lunch. It's understandable. I'm fond of saying this. I was once at a bringing in Melbourne. I'll never forget this. And Reb Harold Serebransky, Oliver Sholem, was bringing, and he said, and he couldn't understand how Jews could come to him in the street and wish him well over the fast. And he said, he appreciated it because he could see that it was important for them. But he said, he's telling me about breakfast and lunch. And I have a different question. On Yom Kippur, it's not that you want to eat. Who can eat? Who can eat on Yom Kippur? You have to understand if your perspective is right, who can eat on Yom Kippur? You're standing in front of your God once a year. You're going to determine whether you live or die for the next 12 months. You're determining what sort of a year you're going to have, what sort of health your children are going to have, whether they're going to be killed or maimed or harmed. And you want to eat? Who wants to eat? So of the three regalim, Tishrei is very important. Everybody goes to a Seder. It's a wonderful thing. You know, we were in Thailand, and the shliach there, who's the son of my first teacher, he told me that they had 1,000 people at their Seder. All these Israelis coming through, they had 1,000 people at the Seder. And, you know, 99% of them had no idea what a Seder was. And they were there quiet, spellbound for the whole of the Seder. But Shavuos, nobody knows what Shavuos is. Nobody, you go down the street and ask somebody about Shavuos, they know. And it's arguably the most important of all the three regalim. Why? Because this is the real moment in the year when a Jew is essence to essence with his God. He's married his God. He's been chosen by his God. He's been counted by his God. He's got a relationship with his God which is suddenly being revealed, and it is critical to be able to grab that and hug it and love it and nourish it. So that's what we got to do, guys.
That's good.
Very good. You know,
3,000.
yeah, it's the biggest in the world.
How do they fit them?
I don't know.